and I am the light within your soul. In the essence of truth and right, love makes the circle whole. And here is...
Hello my lovely viewers. I'm Zoe Mercury and this is my astrology channel for you. And today I want to continue with our psychological astrology series, which is a series of videos that I made as a more, hands-on approach to astrology. So I always give you a psychological topic, that we deal about, and then we look how we can see exactly this dynamic and how we can read about this topic in the chart. Okay, so today's topic is victimization, the archetype of the victim. One very common archetype that all of us carry within us. It's just for some people easier, for some people harder to express it and to connect to this energy of helplessness and having no control over what is happening to you, or not being able to change or prevent the things you don't want happening to you. This is victimization. This is feeling the victim. So what most people try to do when they are victimized, they will tend to either justify their abuser, and you have to understand that they don't do this in order to protect them. They do it because they just can't allow themselves to drop into their place of victimhood and to feel abused, to feel helpless, to feel overpowered. So they try to escape those feelings by finding justifications for what happened. Or another very popular escape mechanism is the opposite. It is blaming. And I know this doesn't make sense at first, because you would assume that blaming someone means actually admitting that they did something wrong to you. And yes, it is, but while you're blaming, while you're in this place of, throwing accusations at your abuser, what you're actually doing is you're looking for a reaction from them. You're waiting for them to give you something that will justify what happened. You're waiting for them to say or do something that will make it good, that will make it undone. Because you cannot allow yourself to just sit with this feeling something really bad happened to you against your will, and that there was no reason for it, it just happened. So yeah, blaming is again an escape mechanism, because we are trying to find a way to make undone what happened, and we can't. All we can do is really sit with it and accept it. And the third escape mechanism, very popular, is analyzing. This doesn't have to include neither justifying nor blaming, but just constantly occupying yourself in your head with going through the situation and looking for clues, analyzing, overanalyzing what happened. It is an escape mechanism because every analyzing happens in the head, whereas every processing of emotion happens in the heart. So analyzing is drawing us away from the heart to the head, and therewith prevents us from feeling the pain. It's important to say that when I talk about abuse here, I do not talk only about, physical violence. That is not, by far, not the only kind of abuse that happens. There is so many more forms of abuse. It can be emotional abuse, energetical abuse, material abuse. For this you want to go and watch my other video about the levels and forms of abuse. Also with astrological tips on how to spot them in a synastry chart. Okay, so when we know that abuse happened, what we want to do is process it. We want to, let it go. We don't want to hang on to this feeling. So what you need to do is, like I said, you need to drop into the place where it hurts. Just, say to yourself, abuse has happened to me, and there was no reason for it, and I didn't deserve it. And then feel the pain that comes up when you actually realize that this is what happened. Acknowledge all the feelings that are there. Don't escape into none of the 3 previous escape mechanisms that I named, okay? Just feel it. Just really go into that victim archetype. Say, wow, I was a victim. I suffered. I was abused. I was mistreated. And it was painful because that's not what I signed up for. That's not what I expected to get. You might have some rage coming up as well, but you will realize it quickly after you allow yourself to drop into that place of victimhood. You will realize that the only rage you actually feel is the rage towards yourself for not being self-loving enough to put up your borders and to protect yourself from what happened. Unless, of course, we're talking about some severe cases of physical abuse, where you try to put up borders but it didn't work. I'm not, trying to say that in that case it's your responsibility, but in most of the other cases of emotional, energetical, material abuse, the root of it is actually lack of self-love. So we allow other people to come and abuse us because we don't value ourselves enough. So the next feeling that comes is rage against yourself. It's like, how could I do this to myself? How could I let this person do this? And if you go on with this exercise, the next stage will be this archetype of the loving mother inside of you coming up and being like, hey, I do love you, and I promise I will keep you safe, and I will never ever again let this happen to you. From now on, I will love you and put up the borders towards other people that are trying to abuse you. So by this process of dropping into the victimhood, the end result is actually a generation of a much deeper, much more profound self-love and self-protection. And that is the whole essence of it. If we don't move through the victimhood, through feeling these feelings, we can't reach that place. We can't, draw out the lesson from what happened. And the lesson is a really beautiful one. If you really acknowledge that you have been a victim and it is because you didn't love yourself, then in future you will never abandon yourself anymore. You will never abuse yourself anymore. You will be very careful, and protect yourself just like you would protect any other person you love. Okay, that was the psychological part of it. So now let's get into the astrology of it. Back into the mind. So in astrology, the archetype of the victim is represented by Neptune. And Neptune is not only that, it's important to understand that, because every planet has their light side and their shadow side, right? So Neptune can also be the high priestess and the goddess, but that's on the light side. On the shadow side, Neptune can be the victim. Okay, so you can watch my video about light and dark sides of the planetary energies, and there I describe exactly how the planets behave when they are balanced and when they are unbalanced, or on the light and on the dark side. So how does Neptune come to represent the victim? Okay, Neptune is unconditional love. This energy of all is one and the energy of the divine. Now, we do live in a third dimension, right? Where it is not unconditional and it is not borderless. The Neptunian energy does try to create an unconditional love scenario. And what this results in, translated into a third dimensional reality, is people with poor borders, an energy of not being able to put up borders of self-protection and individualization. Saying this is how far you can go and not further, because Neptune always wants to give unconditional love. So it creates scenarios where we give and give and give and give without, respecting our own limits, because we want to make it unconditional. And this is how abuse starts, by giving more than you can or more than you are actually willing to. So Neptune in our chart shows in which area of life we are most susceptible to becoming a victim, because we can't put up borders, because borders of any sort in that area make us feel like a very, very painful separation. Neptune is very sensitive to the feeling of separation. Neptune in the first house. The first house is the house of identity. So obviously for people with Neptune in the first house, it is very painful to establish an identity, because saying I am this and this is how I am different from you is separation for them. They don't want to create a separate identity from the rest of the world. So this results in them really offering a huge projection space for everybody else to project their desires and wishes upon them, and they just become what everybody wants, So what goes lost in the whole process is their self. It's like, who am I? What do I want? And as they are just, trying to merge with everybody they are with by adjusting their identity to them, what they never get is to be seen for who they are. So they sacrifice their own identity in order to keep this unconditional connection. Neptune in the second house, of course, second house of worth and the material, absolutely cannot establish material borders, saying this is mine and this is yours, and this is what I'm worth, and this is what you have to pay me for my work. They cannot establish the borders of their own worth. So they really have the danger of getting abused, having people take from them and never give back on a material level. And also when it comes to their work, they can, do a lot but never be able to ask to get paid for it. So what they really imagine is, a world without money and with an unconditional sharing. They really struggle to value the material and to acknowledge it. So they share unconditionally. They will give everything away, everything they have. But what they end up with is usually not being given back anything. So in the end of the month, they just give and can't pay their rent and can't buy their food. So yeah, they do sacrifice their belongings and their material security in order to keep the unconditional connection. Neptune in the third house, the house of communication. They sacrifice their words. They sacrifice saying anything. They sacrifice, communicating, taking an opinion about something, because that is separation to them. Having an own opinion means having a different opinion from somebody, so they do not want that. So sometimes they completely withdraw from communicating. So people might perceive them sometimes as, I don't want to say dumb, but really shallow maybe, or not interesting, or not having anything to say. So they can be just overrun when it comes to asking people for their opinion or communicating. They can, just be left out. And in that way, he sacrifices connection and communication with his surrounding. Another thing is that they might have a problem with the truth with the with Neptune in the third house, because, like I said, they feel as taking a stance, taking an opinion about something, and saying that, speaking their truth, is separation. So they might amend their truth to the person they're currently speaking with. So that might be interpreted as dishonest by some people. But generally they really struggle to make themselves heard, to make themselves understood. Because in their world they just wish everybody would communicate by telepathy, or they even believe that people communicate by telepathy, and that they wish there was just like one universal language that everybody would speak. But that's not what's happening. So with trying to hold on to this idea of unconditional communication through Neptunian spheres of telepathy and energy, they really sacrifice a great deal of connection in the verbal realm. The fourth house. Fourth house is our house, of course. So these people, first of all, struggle to put up borders to their house. They can have their space overrun by everybody and anybody, not being able to keep it their sacred space and say when they need time, on their own to withdraw. They really struggle to protect their sacred space of their home from intruders and energy vampires. So people keep coming into their house and invading their space. Probably also, taking from their house and without bringing anything back. They also do struggle with respecting their own needs. They might try to fulfill everybody else's needs in emotional nurturing, but not their own. because Neptune, yeah, again, no borders, not able to say this is what I need, and I need to take this space, take this time, take this nurturing for myself now. Neptune in the 5th house. Neptune in the 5th house. 5th house is about romance, right? So they are pretty helpless towards the people they fall in love with or people they have an attraction to. So here is where they are very susceptible to being abused, being used emotionally, energetically, however, because they can really tend to idealize the person they are in love with very, very strongly and take a lot and not even be aware of it, because they are idealizing whatever the person does. They can, even like be in this cycle of constantly being rejected by the person and treated badly, but not wanting to see it. Or they can be attracted to victim-savior dynamics in relationships. Because here again, they can't put up borders, which means they might attract people that need a lot. Because people that need a lot, they are looking for people who will give and will give too much without, putting up any borders. So they might really attract these people to them because they, put out this energy of I am unconditionally giving to my romantic partner. So they can attract energy vampires. They can attract people who are really looking to abuse someone or to take from someone. 5th house also stands for children. So these people can be extremely dedicated to their children, not being able to be like a proper authoritative parent, but allowing their children too much, giving their whole self to their children and to raising them, and maybe losing themselves in that process also. Okay. Neptune in the 6th house. The 6th house is the house of service. Right, so people with Neptune in the 6th house, they know no limit to serving others. They can be easily abused, to be an errand boy, or to just let them do all the housework, or just let them organize the lives of everyone around them. Because they can hardly say no when they're asked for a favor. Because in the house of serving, Neptune wants to unconditionally serve everybody. It's also the house of healing, so they might go into the healing arts and live their need to unconditionally serve through that. That would still be the most healthy approach. But yeah, if not, they can really do too much for other people, as in terms of daily errands and doing work and running other people's business for them, right? Because saying no to somebody else's demand is a border that they cannot put. Neptune in the 7th house, the house of relationships. Well, do I need to say anything else? These people have absolutely no borders in their relationships. There is nothing that separates them from their significant other. This might sound similar to the 5th house, just that, the 7th house is about commitment. Here it's about a real, stable relationship, whereas the 5th house is merely about attraction. There it's enough to, feel this romantic attraction, and they lose it. They go into their Neptune of unconditional giving. But the 7th house is really about commitment. It's like these people, when they really commit into a one-on-one relationship, this is where they lose it. Oh, sometimes I feel so harsh. Okay, they want the divine relationship. They want the unconditional love relationship. And they are probably the ones closest to be able to give that. But unless they find another person with a Neptune in the 7th house, probably they will be abused. Because they give too much and they don't have self-respect, self-borders. They will do everything for the relationship to work. They will idealize their partner till the end. And even when the relationship is over, they will still idealize it. They will probably say, it was the most beautiful thing, you know, although it was like a inferno of them just giving and giving and giving and not receiving anything back. And they will, you know, really victimize themselves in the relationship because they idealize the partner. So the partner is the one who can do nothing wrong, right? So it's very easy in a relationship to just put all the blame on them. And they will take it. They will be like, oh yeah, it's all my fault because you're perfect. It's all my fault. They cannot see themselves as an individual outside of the relationship. So that's why they struggle so much to leave the relationship or put some borders for them in the relationship. Neptune in the 8th house. Interesting one. So the 8th house is the house, you know, of the underworld, of the depths, of the taboos, of everything that is below the surface in our society and everything that does not want to be seen. So Neptune in the 8th house might have a poor border between good and bad, between the light and the dark. They might really end up in darkness very often in their life. So, you know, like they might be very easily dragged into, manipulated into drug scene, nightlife, crime, anything that deals with the outlaws and the outcasts from society. And then they can just, you know, wonder one day how they ended up there in this darkness, in this like abyss of society. So they have to be really careful in identifying or putting up this border between light and dark, knowing what is good for them and what is not. They are, yeah, like I said, attracted to diving in the depths. And they're very open to this sphere of life. You know, this also includes the supernatural, so they have no border to the supernatural, which can sometimes, I don't want to scare anyone, but I'm just going to say this as it is, it can give higher accessibility for entities from that world to get into their bodies or into their energy field. So things like, you know, the exorcist and possessions, this is Neptune in the 8th house. These people are open to receive this kind of energies. They need to establish the border between them and the underworld. They need to close this gate. And lastly, the 8th house is about sexual merging. So another problem of them is like in sexual encounters, they might really like always merge with the person, not keep their boundaries, and therewith take in a lot of negative energy or a lot of burdens, clean up the karma of the other person, you know, in that sexual intercourse and take it all on them. Something they want to be aware of as well. And, you know, do some cleanings or rituals after the intercourse always to make sure they're not taking on stuff that is not theirs because they have no border here. Neptune in the 9th house, the house of the gurus, of higher learning, education, travels, faith, religion. These people have no borders when it comes, you know, to beliefs, values, morals. So where they can really fall prey is to wanna be the spiritualists who, you know, can abuse them in order to be their follower or to just pay them tons of money for nothing. They can easily, you know, be convinced to blindly follow a guru or, you know, a religion or a faith. And they can easily be the ones who end up in a suicidal cult and stuff like this. Because they don't have any borders, they don't have any, you know, firm stand when it comes to their own morals, beliefs, and values. So it's really easy to hook them on anything, really. So this is where they want to be really careful in their blind search for faith and their blind believing into anybody. Neptune in the 10th. Neptune in the 10th can be very addicted to his work. Or not really addicted, but he can have very poor borders here. So he might be the one who is like giving it all for the job. The one who is, you know, very dedicated to getting the job done. The one who is working over hours, so takes on everybody's load just in order to get the job done, not because it is their responsibility. So they can be, you know, abused in terms of loading tons of work on their shoulders, and they will exhaust themselves doing it. Yeah, so their kind of feeling of responsibility is their weak point, where they are susceptible to abuse, where they can't say no to other people. And with Neptune in the 10th house, it happens very often that they do exhaust themselves giving too much, but in the end they get no recognition back for it. So if there is this kind of themes happening, you wanna, you know, make sure that you start putting up your borders, because you are overworking, you're overgiving in your workplace, and nobody's going to value you for it, because what you're supposed to learn is the borders. Neptune in the 11th house. Can't say no to friends. They're very, very dedicated to so doing favors and, you know, doing everything for their friends, and they're very dedicated to the organizations they belong to, and you know, the social groups they belong to, because the 11th house is all about, you know, networking on a global level. So these people can be part of different organizations, humanitarian or charity or whatever, you know, any kind of organizations. And, you know, groupings. So they're very dedicated to this. They are, they can't say no. They can't be real when it comes to saving the world. They have this call for saving the world, and this is where they will give everything. So he might sacrifice himself in order to attain his vision of utopia. Where they might be abused, you know, is by, you know, members of organizations who maybe have some shady interests or who have their own agenda, and they will, you know, use this naive belief and faith for a better tomorrow of this individual in order to, you know, make them work for their own goals. So yeah, this placement means like a limitless dedication to the social group or the humanitarian organization or any other affiliation the native is part of. And this is where he wants to be careful to really do only things that are in the who are serving his vision, and not be blindly following some organization's aims. Neptune in the 12th house. Neptune in the 12th house. I don't know what to say. This is like the ultimate no borders. Like, this person doesn't have no borders towards anything whatsoever, right? They are absolutely in this, you know, sphere of, I am an eternal divine being, and they are not even present in this reality. So the main thing they might suffer, as in terms of abuse from the world, is just like being not seen, being completely overlooked, being invisible. to the world. They might really feel like they are invisible. It's because they are somewhere else. They're like with their attention usually in their dream world, in higher spheres, and they have a hard time partaking in life, so they might really not even be perceived as existing. So where he cannot put up borders is in his connection to the divine and his connection to anything and his sense of reality, right? So he needs to distinguish between dream and reality. And he needs to put up some borders to his empathy and his compassion. Yeah, another thing that the 12th house can suffer is taking on too much pain of the world on their shoulders. Because like I said, they have no borders to anything, and they have a great compassion because it's, Neptune and the 12th house, it's all Pisces related compassion. So they might take on the whole world's pain because of their limitless and unconditional compassion and their awareness that everything is one. So in order to save themselves, in order to be able to partake in reality and not constantly escape to their dream world, they want to be able to put up some borders between themselves and everybody else's suffering. Okay, so that was the Neptunes in the houses. And as you see, from my talking, working with Neptune has a lot to do with consciously working on establishing borders in order to prevent the victimization. So in whichever area you have Neptune, you will be involved in a lifetime process of trying to establish and maintain your borders in that area. It's not, going to be a natural thing to you ever. Because by your natural programming, you are programmed to be borderless in that area. And to, probably as a soul group work on some merging and bringing in compassion and unconditional love into that area of life. But yeah, you need to do this balancing act between showing compassion and believing in the unconditional potential, but still protecting yourself enough to not be victimized. This is, walking this very thin line between the light and dark side of Neptune. You have to be balanced. It's always all about being balanced. Alright, so this is my take on Neptune and the victim archetype. I hope you enjoyed and you learned something, and yeah, looking forward to my next video on psychological astrology. Thank you so much for watching.
And I am the light within your soul, in the essence of truth and right. Love makes the circle whole. And here we stand in line, waiting for some sacred sign. And I am the light within your soul, in the essence of truth and right. Love makes the circle whole. And here we stand in line, waiting for some sacred sign.